Most people in this life are so certain that they have the answer. They know what is correct. They know what is morally right. They know the answers. That is the disease of our time. Certainty. But certainty comes from a great degree of anxiety because you're afraid of not knowing the answers. You're afraid of life itself. You're afraid of being open to other possibilities. By being certain, by knowing this is the correct answer. Robert Greene's books are evil. Robert Greene's books are wonderful. You're closing yourself off to the possibility that maybe they're not evil. Maybe they're not so wonderful. Maybe their life itself, things aren't just black and white. They're alive. There can be many things. But your anxiety, your insecurity, your need to have all the answers is a disease. It's infecting you. It's an emotional disease. It's corrupting you from the inside out. And it comes from your anxiety. So let go. Don't feel like you have to know all of the answers.
I talk in Mastery about something called a concept called learning by doing. And back in the Middle Ages, they used to have an apprenticeship that you would go through. 7 years. You would learn to be a craftsman, right? You'd first go from being an apprentice to a journeyman to a master. By doing things, the brain learns. But if you never do anything, you're never going to learn. So if you suddenly said, I've been thinking about a podcast, I would say, get off your ass and start the podcast tomorrow. And it fails. You have learned so many things. You've learned more in those 3 months of failure than you have been 2 years thinking or 5 years of getting an MBA from some school and putting yourself in massive debt. Learn by doing. Learn by failing.
Why is planning and procrastination that comes with the prolonged planning so tempting for people? Like, why do we love to plan?
Because you're afraid of failure, quite honestly. Freud has a word for it in German, Erfolgsangst, which means fear of success. Because this is something that afflicts a lot of adolescents. Because if you're successful, you now have responsibility. You now have a reputation. You now have succeeded, and your next venture could fail, right? There's pressure that comes with trying something and putting your name out there. And if I don't ever try anything, if I don't bother, if I blame the world, I blame my parents, I blame my education system, I blame my partner, this, that, and the other, then you never have to worry. You never have to have that responsibility. You never have to have that fear of success. And that holds people back. So it's easier to not do anything and stay in your little bubble and go, God, if only I had money, I would have written this great novel. I would have, done this, or that, or the other. It's just crap. You're trying to delude yourself, and you're afraid of actually putting your neck out on the line. That's what it comes down to. It's a common syndrome among adolescents.
I was reading, I think it was the book, The Courage to be Disliked, and it was talking in one of the sections about how some people they prefer to live in the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
And the realm of possibility is the space you live when you declare to the world that you're going to do something and be something, and before you actually do it. So when I tell my friends, listen, I'm going to become an actor, for example, the year and a half where I go around saying that I live in the world of possibility, where there's been no feedback to disprove me yet,
yeah,
which is nice.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of getting the credit for being the type of person that's aspiring to change.
Yeah.
And that realm of possibility before you get feedback or try
is
a very nice place to be for some.
It is, and it's very addicting, and it's kind of a narcotic. But the thing is, so you've got this realm of possibility, which you could become anything. I could become an actor. I could become a great novelist. I could become a CEO. I could be Elon Musk II. But the way the world works is you don't achieve anything unless you have limits. Having limits and hitting that wall and that resistance is what makes you learn, is what makes you great, is how the human brain functions. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're learning the piano. Right? You can't just start out playing anything and just doing all the notes. It's very limited what you can do, right? And you have to go within those limits and those walls and learn the first things first, and then those walls start to expand a little bit. But you're constantly pressing against limits, and those limits make you stronger and stronger. It's like when you're swimming, the resistance in the water is what makes your muscles bigger, right? Mm-hmm. The resistance of limits is what makes your brain bigger, makes you more successful, makes you learn. But if all you do is live in that nebulous world of possibility, you're never developing, you're never getting any muscle, you're never getting any strength. You're not developing life skills. It's a tough world, Stephen. You know that. People can be very cruel. It can be a very mean-spirited world. You have to have a thick skin in this world. You have to develop some toughness. And you develop that toughness by trying things out and by failing. And if you fail, my wife's in the film business and we know a lot of actors. An actor, you think it's all glamorous, but it's actually like 99% rejection. People are constantly rejecting you. And they're rejecting you for things that you have no control over, like your looks, And so what separates the actors who succeed and the ones who don't are those that have a bit of a tough skin. They don't take that rejection, go, oh, I'm so unworthy. I hate myself. Oh, the world's so awful. They go, all right, I'm going to go on to the next one. I learned what wasn't working there. And you develop some toughness. If you don't develop that toughness, you're never going to get anywhere in life. And you get it by trying and working at it.
And when you're in that sort of first chapter of your professional life, is there anything from all of the work that you've done, the writing that you've done, that a young person should be trying to acquire? And I say that, should they be aiming at knowledge, skills, reputation, money, network?
Definitely not money. Definitely not reputation. Perhaps, or fame. Perhaps network can't help, but what you really want to do in this world, in the 21st century, in our decade, is skills. You want to be learning skills. The more skills you have, and I mean true skills, I don't mean trying something out for a year and then going on to something else for another. I mean getting real skill at something, right? Whether it's in computers, whether it's in the arts, in any field. Real skill. And then if you can develop 2 or 3 skills by the time you're in your 20s and still have some fun, the world is going to open up to you, because what you're going to be able to do when you turn 30 is you're going to go, I can take that skill that I learned in computers. I can take that skill I learned in media and in creating a podcast or whatever, and I can create a business that's going to combine the two in a way that no one has ever thought of, because I'm a unique person. The world will open up to you. Skills are the gold of the 21st century. And if you're seduced by money, if you think about money, you're doomed, because that's not what matters in life. Because let's say you have 2 job offers. One is at Goldman Sachs, opening position for $150,000 a year, and one is at some startup for $30,000 a year, and you're living in New York and you're going to be starving. You're going to be sharing a miserable little flat somewhere in Bushwick, whatever, okay? Take the $30,000 a year job, because you're going to learn so much. You're going to be hands-on. Whereas in that other job, you're going to be lost in there. You're going to be among hundreds of other young people, and you're not going to have responsibilities. Here you're going to have responsibilities. So money is not what matters to you. Because when you're in your 20s, you can starve. You can live on less food. You can have it a little tough because you're young. I know myself. I was very poor. I lived in London. I had a job in London in 1984, I believe. 84. And I was making, I think it was £30 a week. Maybe it's less than that. It was my starting salary. And my girlfriend at the time, the only thing we could eat was turnips and cauliflower. Cauliflower cheese was our main dish. But I was 25. I can handle it. So you can handle not making money and learning, because that's what's most important.
I don't think many young people in that first season of life realize how long life is. So, we try and take shortcuts. We try and get to the money as fast as we can. But you're telling me to take a longer road, which is the acquisition of skills, even at the cost of some of those short-term rewards that are very tempting to post on my Instagram.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also, you look at somebody like Steve Jobs. I can relate to that because he wasn't interested in money at all. It was never the motivating factor. It's never been my motivating factor, right? I wanted to have fun, and I wanted to be successful, and I wanted to be able to write. He wanted to design the most beautiful pieces of technology in the world. It ended up he was like the richest man in the world at the time, but he never cared about money. It wasn't what motivated him. I never cared about money, and now I'm not as rich as Steve Jobs, but I'm doing fairly well. Because it'll come to you. If you play the game right, if you learn the skills when you're young, and then you develop your own business, by the time you're 35, you'll be making 4 times what you would have made at that Goldman Sachs job, right? That's how the game is played these days. Starting your own business, being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is the most powerful position you can aim for. Some people are destined for that. That's not in their DNA. But to me, that's what we should all be aiming for, to be your own boss. Because personally, I hated working for other people. But being an entrepreneur, starting your own business, one that has a niche in this world, you're going to make all the money that you'll ever need.
It's quite painful being an entrepreneur, though. I think it was actually Elon that said, building his businesses is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. And I can relate to some degree of the businesses that I've built over the years and just the immense hardship and uncertainty. And, I guess there's at times a subtle envy for your team members who are unaware of the chaos that one has to endure to make sure everybody's paid on time and, make sure everyone's happy.
Okay, but the lesson for me in all of that is altering your sense of what pleasure and happiness is. So in the moment, it's painful, right? And we don't like pain. Nobody likes pain. I don't like pain, right? Mm-hmm. But if your sense of what pleasure is and happiness is only like here, from the present moment to here, it's going to be very hard to get out of that. But if your sense of pleasure and happiness is here,
long term,
yeah, then you've got power, you've got maneuverability, you have room to maneuver, and that's the key to the whole thing. So,
okay, so you're saying that if I have a short-term view on happiness, I expect it today, now, and every day.
Yeah.
Then my life's not going to be great. But if I expect happiness to be a long-term,
yeah. So look at you now. Is what I'm trying to say. You're pretty happy, I imagine.
Yeah, I am.
You're pretty fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have gotten there if, when you were 24 or whatever, you just gave up because it was so painful. I better just go grab that easy job working for a bank or something. You'd be miserable now. Whereas look at you now. That's what I'm trying to open people's minds to. Follow Stephen Bartlett here. That's the model.
One of the things that I think helped me get here is my dark side. You talk about dark sides a lot. And when I say my dark side, I mean the insecurity, the shame, the wanting to fit in, all of those kinds of things that acted as a driving force. And a lot of people have a dark side. I've heard you talk about how all great achievers have a bit of a dark side in them. How do we channel our dark side so that it's productive and not destructive? I was talking to someone the other day who is a very successful entrepreneur, and they have their own story of like shame and embarrassment and trying to run away from a certain life they used to have.
Right.
And that made them successful. But now they work 18 hours a day. They're just like almost addicted to their work.
Right.
So I wonder if it can go too far.
I see. Yeah.
But they say they're happy.
They do.
Yeah, they say they're really happy.
And do you believe it?
It's hard to distinguish true happiness from the contentment that you get when you are successfully escaping your dark side. Do you know what I mean by that? Because this individual has successfully ran away from their darkness, and they appear to be in a state of contentment.
Yeah.
Because they're succeeding in their pursuit of running away from their past. But I don't know if that's happiness. Some yogi might tell me that happiness is when you stop running.
Well, I worked for somebody. I was on the board of directors for this company, American Apparel, which no longer exists. And the CEO, Dov Charney, was the founder of the company, an incredible entrepreneur who, from one little shop here in Los Angeles, when I met him, created this empire. And it was incredibly rewarding, and he was, I'd say, a very fulfilled person. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop. It was like a demon possessed him. He had to have more. He had to build more buildings. He had to have more American Apparels all over the world. He leveraged himself, and then when the crash occurred in 2007, just after the company went public, he was so in debt that the company never recovered, right? He tried too hard. He didn't know the limits Okay. So part of this isn't, when I said if money motivates you, then you're going to have that demon. If fame and reputation motivates you, then that demon is going to seize you by the throat and going to make you work 18 hours until everybody eats your dust and you humiliate all your enemies and you're miserable, right? So knowing who you are and knowing what matters is going to save you from that kind of demonic possession, because you're actually not going to be very successful if you're like that. You're going to burn yourself out. You're not going to have very good ideas. What happens to a lot of people when they become successful is, first of all, it goes to their head. They think they have the Midas touch. They think they've got, the golden touch. And then their minds start going in this kind of this singular direction. They learned how to do something and they're just doing it. And they don't know how to learn. They don't know that there's other ways of doing things, right? And that's what happens when you become completely possessed and your mind isn't open and it isn't free and isn't expanding and you're not creative anymore. To be creative will require you to try something different, to not expand your company endlessly like he did, and instead to take the 5 branches that you have here in Los Angeles and make the product better and be more creative with it, and don't be possessed by money and fame and reputation. That's the answer, I think, there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. Yeah, something that I think many a person struggle with, which is in part this idea of focusing on the thing in front of you versus getting too distracted with other opportunities. And I wanted to talk to you about this idea of focus.
Sure.
And how important you think it is for mastery.
Yeah.
I meet so many young people who will say to me, oh, I'm doing this little crypto thing here, and I've got this hair business here, and I've got this other thing here. What would you say to those people that are trying to become a master in this world as it relates to focus?
It's funny because I'm helping the son of an old friend of mine who's got that problem, and he's incredibly successful. I hope he's not listening to this. He's 20 years old. He's very wealthy. He's done amazing things. But he's one of those people who spread himself out to all these different things. And I can't find a through line what connects them all except making money and having connections and stuff. And it's very alluring in this world, particularly, where there's so many possibilities, where you can get on the internet, you can learn this, that, the other. People are doing these things. You can get into crypto. You can start your own business here. You can get into the health and fitness world. You can, and then later on try to figure out how to connect them all. But life doesn't work like that. That's not how the brain functions. That's not what we were meant for, because it doesn't start from you. The whole thing has to start from you. It can't start from the world. It can't start from what other people are doing. It can't start from what's sexy. It has to come from within. If it doesn't come from within, then you're going to be floundering for years and years and years. And so what I've done with this young person, whose name I won't mention, but I love dearly, is what is it that really is in your heart? What is it that you really, really love? How can we connect this crypto with this media business that you're starting, with the sports world that you're starting, with this fitness thing? What connects them all, And to me, I was getting the sense, we haven't solved it yet, but he's kind of excited by celebrities and by that world. And that's fine. I think there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm saying, well, maybe what connects all this is the film business, right? Because the film business is pretty wide-ranging. To be a producer, to raise money, you're dealing with all kinds of different people. You're networking. You're meeting starlets. It's a glamorous life, but it's focused, okay? So, when you focus on something, the world just kind of opens up, but you have to be focusing on the right thing. So if you were meant to be a writer and then you decide because you want money to go into law school and then you focus very deeply on law school, what will happen is for a year or two, you'll be able to skid by, but then the wheels will start going slower and slower because you're not interested in it. You're not connected to it. You get bored and your focus will start falling to pieces. But if it's something you love, you can focus on that for 7, 8, 10, 12 years and never get bored.
From observing a certain family member of mine do a very similar thing, part of it as well is that when she would start one pursuit, starting X business, it would get hard, as
Yeah.
it always does. And when you look over at the person across the road, they seem to be having a much easier life with their thing or with their crypto or with their whatever.
Yeah.
And they tell you the story of how much money they've made and how easy it was, whatever. So you get tempted into believing that the grass is greener, and you pursue that. So now you're doing two things. Now your first thing starts to suffer.
Yeah.
And I think especially in the early season of life, when you don't have Elon Musk resources, much of the game is focusing enough on one thing to build those resources so that you have the chance of being able to do more than one thing or spreading your bets a bit more. But in that first season, when you're in resource accumulation phase, I think my early investors in my company, I remember one day emailing my first investor, who's a very successful man, and saying, I've got an idea. And it was an idea other than the one he'd invested in. And I remember the email, I was 18 years old, and he hit me so hard on that email. He was like, if you don't focus on one thing, you will never, ever
Wait,
be
you were the
successful.
one that was interested in this other
Yeah,
thing.
I was
Oh,
trying to.
he was the one. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so my investor, he was a very successful man, and I emailed him this other idea, which I thought was amazing.
Yeah.
And he sent me this email back, which was like being hit by a whip. And he was like, if you don't focus on one thing now, you will never be successful. Because also you rob yourself, as you said, of the chance of accumulating deep skills.
Yeah. Yes, it is. I remember this is something that wise people know. And if you're young, if you have like a mentor like you did, who could tell you the truth, the ropes as they are, it will help save you years of misery. I remember when we were at American Apparel, it was the year 2007. The company was just about to go public. I was about to be put on the board of directors, and this man came to me who was like your investor, and he said, Robert, just make sure that Dove's doesn't mindlessly expand. Make the brand focused. Have it focused on one thing, and then he will be successful. At the time, I thought that was interesting, but I didn't really have the guts to explain that to Dove. But there are people out there who understand the truth of this. But the other thing about envy, like you say, you see your other friend doing crypto and they're having so much fun and making so much money. Tell you, it's bullshit. They're not having as much fun as you think, right? People create a front on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, where life seems so glorious, but they're never having as much fun as you might imagine. You know, in my book, Laws of Human Nature, I talk about Aristotle Onassis, who in the 60s was the wealthiest man in the world. He was married to John F. Kennedy's widow, Jacqueline Kennedy, Jacqueline Onassis. Who could be happier than that? He had yachts, etc. He was the most unhappiest, miserable person in the world, as Jacqueline Kennedy explained in her autobiography. He was such a mean-spirited, unhappy person. Yet everybody envied him because he had this beautiful wife and all that money. The people you envy are not doing nearly as well as you think. So don't let that influence your decisions in life.
I've never forgotten a certain Johnny Ive clip that I watched many, many years ago. I think it must have been 5 years ago now, where he talks about working with Steve Jobs. And this is what he says in the clip. And I've never forgotten it. Never forgotten it.
This sounds really simplistic, but it still shocks me how few people actually practice this. And it's a struggle to practice. But is this issue of focus. Steve was the most remarkably focused person I've ever met in my life. And the thing with focus is it's not sort of like this thing you aspire to or you decide on Monday, you know what, I'm going to be focused. It is every minute, why are we talking about this? This is what we're working on. You can achieve so much when you truly focus. And one of the things that Steve would say, because I think he was concerned that I wasn't, he would say, how many things have you said no to? And I would, honestly, I would have these sacrificial things, because I wanted to be very honest about it, and so I say, oh, I said no to this, and no to that. And he knew that I wasn't vaguely interested in doing those things anyway. So there was no real sacrifice. What focus means is saying no to something that you, with every bone in your body, you think is a phenomenal idea, and you wake up thinking about it, but you say no to it because you're focusing on something else.
Yeah. Amen. That's That's the church of focus. I agree with completely. I mean, I hate using my own examples because I'm a rara avis, I'm a rare bird. But, I have this book that I'm writing, okay? And it's on a very specific subject. And I get distractions all the time. People want, I could do this speaking engagement in India where I've never been before, or Egypt, kind of thing, or get involved in this television project. And I'm actually never really seduced by it because I just love writing. But where it really comes down to is I'm writing this book and it's been going really not well. It's because I'm not focused on the actual thing I'm trying to say. So you can bring that level of focus down to the finest point of your business or your writing or whatever. What is it you're trying to say? What is it you're trying to accomplish? What is your brand really about? Get into the nitty-gritty, get into the little fine grains of sand and know what that is. So every time I'm writing my chapter and I start writing about something that's not directly relevant to what it's about and what the reader is going to be interested in, I'm making a mistake. And I make the mistake for several weeks and then I realize it and I pull back. So that level of focus has to have a lot of energy behind it because you're so in love with what you're doing that when you deviate from it, this little radar inside of your brain goes, you're off, you got to get back to it, right? And it's painful, but when you do get back to it and when things do click, it's incredibly pleasurable. So the focus for young people that seems so painful, God damn it, everyone else is having so much fun and I'm having to learn this. Just keep telling yourself that you're doing something that your brain is going to reward you with several years down the line. So that friend of yours that seems to be having so much fun, in 3 years, they're going to be sliding down the ladder, working at some crap job, whereas you're going to be rising up. So just keep your mind on the larger issue there, and know that working with what your brain works well with will pay incredible rewards down the line.
When they talk about compounding returns in life, they always say that it's slow, then it's fast. And even this podcast, if you look at the graph of this podcast, for the first 3 years of me recording in my cupboard on Sunday nights alone, completely flat. No one's listening. And then by maybe I'd say year 4 or year 5, it goes straight up.
Yeah.
And that's a consequence of those first 3 years were acquiring skills, understanding what people liked and why they liked listening to the show, and actually getting better as a talker, a speaker, an interviewer, etc. And what most people miss is they miss that internship of the slow, lonely, unrewarding couple of years because they lose focus. No one's clapping, no downloads. I've never seen another route. I've never seen another path there. I've never seen the overnight success.
Well, I mean, I know I can name 5 other podcasters who have the same story as you who've told me that. Lewis Howes, Chris Williamson, Jay Shetty, they all have the same story. For several years, nothing. Crickets. And I knew these people when they were just starting out. And then that happens. I remember when I was working with 50 Cent on the book, The 50th Law, people look at rap stars and they go, wow, the glamour, the fun, the excitement, the sexiness, the lifestyle. But he said, I knew him because I was with him. Nobody worked harder than 50. He was incredibly disciplined and incredibly focused. And when he made it in the music business, it took incredible years of difficulty, hardship, and failure. But nobody ever sees that. They only see him in concert and all the glamour and all the fun. They never focus on the years of grit and near failure. He got shot, he nearly died. His record label dropped him. He had to work his way back up into the music industry from the very bottom until Eminem finally noticed him. But we don't see that in these celebrities, all the grit and the hard work that took them to get there. We just see the success and we get seduced by the success.
I've heard you reference before Howard Gardner's Frames of Mind, Theory of Multiple Intelligences book. And in that book, it says that there are 5 types of intelligences: logical intelligence, linguistical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, spatial intelligence, and bodily intelligence. And it defines them quite differently. Logical is the ability to reason and solve problems and think in abstract terms, like scientists and mathematicians. Linguistical intelligence is things like writers, lawyers, and poets. You're one of those writers. Interpersonal intelligence are leaders, psychologists, and teachers. Spatial intelligence are architects, artists, and pilots. And lastly, bodial intelligence is athletes, dancers, and surgeons. How important is it to know your form of intelligence to be successful in life?
So figuring out what that is incredibly important. And the reason why I like this book so much is we tend to think of intelligence as intellectual, as, computer programming or mathematics or whatever it is, having a PhD in this field. But that's not intelligence. Intelligence is also bodily intelligence. Like somebody like Kobe Bryant in basketball is as intelligent as Albert Einstein, but in a different way. So you have a parent who's always geared towards, going to the best school and being an intellectual giant, and their child wants to do ballet or sports or something, and you kind of look down on that and you say, no, no, no. You're setting your child up for misery. Recognize what one of these frames are for your child and press on it and let them go in that direction, because it's what they're naturally gearing towards. It's what's fun, right? So for me, it was linguistic intelligence, words. Since I was a child, words bewitch me. I can't believe that we have words to name things and that there are these symbols with letters that have sounds. But a lemon isn't a lemon, it's just a word. And I was like 5 years old, what the hell can that be? That's so interesting, And that you could take a word apart and spell other words with it. So I knew from very early on that it was words, 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 words. And I absolutely stink at one of these intelligence is mechanical intelligence, knowing how to build things. I'm terrible at that, which is very odd because my father was brilliant at that and he wasn't good at any of the others and I didn't inherit it. So that goes all, that kind of debunks genetics right there. But, so figuring out which one of those and leaning in it and making that the direction of your life is so, so important. So if your thing is interpersonal intelligence and you understand that, and yet you're not heading into a job in which you're social and around people, you're going to be so miserable. But if you know that what your thing is interpersonal intelligence, you've got like 100 different directions you can head into. That doesn't mean you have to only be a social worker. It just means you have to be a leader of people because you understand you like being around people, you like working with others, you're very empathetic. There could be 100 different kinds of jobs. Mm-hmm. But once you know that, it gives you a sense of direction. It's by far the most important step for people, and I always recommend people reading this book because it's very, very important.
Much of the reason we lose focus, as I've seen in my own friendship group, in my own family, is because of envy.
Yeah.
How important is it to get control of one's envy? I've heard you describe it as the ugliest emotion.
Well, it's ugly in the sense of, it's an admission that you feel inferior, that you feel that somebody is better than you are. And who wants to admit that? There's a very famous psychologist named Alfred Adler from the 1920s. He was a disciple of Freud. He thought this ability of always wanting to be better and superior to others was the most motivating factor of 90% of human behavior, that we always want to feel at least that we're superior in some way. And the sense that we're inferior creates what he calls an inferiority complex. So it's very, very painful to tell yourself that this person is doing better than you are, or that they're younger and better looking than you are, that their wife is more interesting than you, or their kids are doing better, because it means it's a slight on you, right? We are very prone to envy genetically by the way our brains operate. So it's a known factor that chimpanzees are prone to feeling envy, right? If you give one chimp a banana or a grape and don't give another one, they'll be giving that kind of evil eye, the stink eye that we associate with envy. So it's something that's in primates. And what it comes from, I believe, is our brains operate by comparison. That's how we learn. That's how we understand things. We understand that this is a wild animal because it's not that other thing over there. Our brains compare bits of information to decide what is what's different from what's the other thing. So our brains are geared towards comparing. And when you create a social animal, we are the most social animal on the planet, and you have that brain that's constantly comparing, we're using that mechanism to compare ourselves to other people and always wanting what other people have. And they've noticed in hunter-gatherer societies from back in 30,000 years ago, the few that still had existed in the 20th century, that envy was a huge problem among them. And so that when one person was given a gift, everybody in the tribe was so upset and angry that the person who was given the gift had to give it to other people so that they wouldn't be the target of envy, because it could lead to being murdered, right? So envy is deeply ingrained in all of us. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others, okay? But we don't want to admit it. So if I compare myself to some other writer who I think is having a better life than I am, who's sold more books than me, what I'll do in my mind, instead of saying, he deserves that or she deserves that because they are actually a better writer, I'll go, they don't really deserve it. They're a hack. They're just doing that because they know what the public wants. And they're not, my books are going to be read 100 years from now, but nobody will read their books in 5 years. I justify it to myself, right? I don't feel envy. No, I'm not saying that person's superior. In fact, they're actually inferior to me. That's the games that we play when we envy other people. And it's something that social media is like a nuclear bomb of envy, right? So 60 years ago, I wouldn't have known what my neighbors or friends from college are doing and how much more money they're making and how happy they are. But now you know what everybody on the planet is doing and how good they are and how happy they are and the incredible trips they're taking and, you know, the great schools that their children are getting into, on and on and on. So it's this machine for manufacturing envy, and it's infesting our political system as well. It's seeping into all aspects of life, but nobody wants to talk about it and nobody wants to admit it. The main thing with envy is to admit that you feel it, okay? So I will get on my hands and I will say, you know what? Sometimes I actually envy Ryan Holiday. He's 30 years younger than I am. He's written already more books than I have. Before I even wrote my first book, he's got a family. He's got these great homes. He's doing really well. Yeah, sometimes I feel envy. I'll admit it, okay? If you don't admit it to yourself, then it just festers and something ugly will happen. And so what I'm able to do with the feelings of envy that I might have is, I think, God, Robert, there's no reason to feel that way. Go through a process and go, he's actually deserved all the success he's had. You know, he deserves it because he's worked really, really hard and he's a really good person. He's ethical. He deserves it. And so you should be happy for him, which I am. I'm incredibly happy for him. But I have that first little twinge of envy. You have to admit it to yourself. And it's not an easy thing to admit because it means you're admitting you feel inferior for a moment.
Can you use it productively?
Yes.
That envy?
Yes, most definitely. And I talk in Laws of Human Nature about strategies for doing that. One of them is there's somebody that you envy in the world. Well, instead of festering with that ugly emotion, make that a spur. Instead of envy, feel what's called emulation, where you feel competitive and you're going to be as good as they are or better than they are. You're going to use that sense of inferiority to motivate you to work harder and harder and harder. Another thing is, so when somebody has failure and we're actually kind of gleeful about it, it's called Schadenfreude, right? Mm-hmm. The opposite of Schadenfreude is a phrase that Nietzsche called Mitfreude, which means instead of feeling pleasure in their pain, you feel their pleasure as well. So instead of feeling envy, try and feel happy for the other person. Now you'll say that I can't do that, but yes, you can. You have to practice it. There's a great psychologist named William James who called it an as-if strategy. So just tell yourself that I'm actually happy for their success. And when you do that, it's actually a really great feeling to actually feel good about somebody else doing well. Is a very ennobling feeling. It kind of raises you up. Instead of lowering you down and making you feel ugly, it makes you feel noble. It makes you feel better about yourself. And it kind of opens up your whole emotional life. So I have other strategies in the book, but those are a couple.
I was wondering why your book, Power, is still selling unbelievably well. I mean, most books, when they come out, they have their moment and then they're done. But for some reason, what you write in this book is as compelling, tempting, and attractive to people now more than ever. And one would then assume that's because people feel more powerless. And when they see the book, it offers them a promise of something that they so desperately want.
Yeah.
Is that an accurate assessment?
I think it is. I mean, I've noticed in the last 6 years or so, the sales have been higher than they've ever been before. And a lot of it, young people went through the crash of 2008, then they had to deal with the COVID and the pandemic. And in those years where the world